Welcome back to the Garden with Joy and Holly radio show. Rose expert Paul Zimmerman moments away, but hey, do you have some yellow jackets flying around that you need to control? Rescue has the device that can fix that for you.
During these dry summer months, you'll notice more aggressive yellow jackets flying around. Yellow jackets are looking for...
That is not something you want to have in an aggressive yellow jacket.
No. Yellow jackets are looking for your barbecue meat, sweet drinks, as well as water sources. You want to keep them at bay with the Rescue Yellow Jacket traps. Rescue Yellow Jacket traps are eco-friendly, do-it-yourself option to keep those stinging pests away from you. These traps are a powerful lure for yellow jackets and will not attract beneficial honeybees. All Rescue products are made in the USA. You can go to rescue.com for where to buy all Rescue products. That's rescue.com, yellow jacket traps, and other pest control solutions.
Holly, let's go to the hotline and bring in our guest for this week.
Paul Zimmerman is an owner of Paul Zimmerman Roses, Consulting and Design. Paul is the author of the book Everyday Roses, published by Taunton Press, and is an active speaker and writer. He is the former rose consultant to the Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina, and is an independent consultant to Jackson and Perkins. He is also actively does garden design and consulting both in person and virtually. Welcome to the program, Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you, and thank you for asking me to be here.
Well, thank you for taking time. Not only you're going to educate Holly and myself, but all of our listeners. We're not experts in roses, and that's why we bring people like you on the program, so we can also learn all together. So let's start with this. What are roses? Are they just a hardy flower, or are they actually a shrub?
They are a shrub. And that is a very key thing to keep in mind. They are nothing more than a flowering shrub. That's really, at the end of the day, what they are. And for a good garden rose, that's really the only way you want to approach it. It's a flowering shrub, just like other flowering shrubs in your garden. Same kind of care, the basics and things like that. So at the end of the day, it's a flowering shrub.
Right. And I think that's very important, is that a lot of people get confused that maybe roses are something more or less or different or whatever. And like you said, at the end of the day, that's what it breaks down to. Now, how does one go about choosing the best rose for them? And or are there roses for newbies versus somebody that may be looking to change things up? Is there any sort of guide or ideal rose for all?
Yeah, I think the thing to keep in mind is that a lot of things that we've learned about roses over the years, and even the last 20, 30 years, is a lot of it was written by folks who exhibit roses, who do the rose shows, and they're very talented gardeners. I'm not saying anything about that in that sense of the word, but their ideals are higher than what the average gardener wants, like myself, for example. I don't exhibit. So I think the first thing to do is think about what is a garden rose. And a garden rose, to me, is the definition of a rose that doesn't take a lot of care, doesn't take a lot of fuss, basic fertilizing, basic care. Cut out dead, disease, dying wood when you need it. That's appropriate, things along those lines. But don't give them a lot of fuss. So where do you begin this process? How do you begin this journey? Locally. Roses for so long have been told that, this rose does well in every part of the country. You all are plant people. You're in Wisconsin, I'm in South Carolina. A plant that does well for you will not do well for me, and vice versa. And it's the same with roses. So try to think locally. Local botanical gardens, local independent garden centers that have a good, robust rose program are a good way to go. Local chapters of the American Rose Society, local master gardeners groups are good places to go. So start with what's going to do locally well in your part of the world. You're up in Wisconsin. There's a German rose breeder by the name of Cordes, Kordes. Fabulous roses for your part of the world. They breed in Hamburg, Germany. No spray trials, just terrific roses. So start locally. That's really the place to begin. Like any plant, what does well in your specific growing region?
And then basically, once you find that type of category of roses that work well in your area, kind of the palette of what color you want is kind of endless to some degree, isn't it?
It is, yeah, Joey. The only thing that roses don't come in is the color blue. There's variations of mauve and things along those lines, but the genetics for blue color is not found in roses, which is fine with me. That's fine. But yeah, it's an endless palette of color, and an endless growth habit. If you're a gardener, think about this. So I'm going to say, okay, I've got a flowering shrub for you. You get every color of the rainbow but blue. Most of them bloom all season long from spring to fall. And you get everything from plants that grow 1.5 feet high to ramblers that go 30 feet up a tree. That's the palette that you're working with when it comes to roses as garden plants in a garden landscape.
So much like tomatoes or peppers or eggplants, one doesn't fit all because they have very unique characteristics for each type of plant.
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head. And that's the second part about, we talk about growing the best roses for you. Okay, so you say, okay, this is the kind of rose or the genetics or whatever the case may be. Then you start to say, okay, what's the rose's job in the garden? If the job is to line a low sidewalk or something along those lines, well, then maybe you're going to go with something that's maybe going to go 2 foot maximum. But you don't go for something that's going to go 8 foot maximum, try to keep it down to 2 feet. So you have to also begin thinking about that aspect of it, like we do with all other plants in our garden. What's its job? What do you want it to be? Screening, hedging. What do you want to do with that rose? And that's the second part. What does well in your area, and what's the rose's job in the garden?
Now, growing up on the farm, we had roses in the flower bed next to the house. But are there roses? Can you grow roses in containers?
Yes, you can. Absolutely, you can. Obviously, you want to stay with some of the ones with shorter stature. Florabundance, which is a class of roses. Is that how roses are generally put together, are classes? So up in your part of the world, Florabundance would do well for you. Polyanthus, spells just like it sounds, would also do well for you as well. So those shorter stature roses would do extremely well. The main thing to keep about when you're doing roses in containers, good healthy soil, the basics, compost, keep that soil alive, keep it moving. Those are the basic things. But roses grow their roots deeper than they do necessarily wide. So I would say a pot that's maybe 18, 20 inches deep is certainly would be the minimum. So maybe a 20, 22-inch diameter pot. Half whiskey barrels, fabulous for growing roses. But roses thrive in containers. Underplant them with like herbs and things that tumble over the side. It's a wonderful addition to any deck or any patio.
Thank you. So we are talking with Paul Zimmerman. He's the owner of Paul Zimmerman Roses, consulting and design, and a rose expert. Now, your book is called Everyday Roses. And what can our readers expect when they pick up a copy? And maybe what's something unique or notable that is in your book that would entice them to pick up a copy?
What they can expect is common sense. Roses, sorry to be so blunt, but roses have gotten this mystique of being these phenomenally difficult, fussy, intense things to grow. And my book, when I wrote the book Everyday Roses, I approached it just from a standpoint of this is a plant, it's a flowering shrub. You don't have to do a lot of that fussy stuff. So you're going to get a lot of good common sense. You're going to get a lot of sustainable rose growing. I grow organically. My wife and I have a farm here in South Carolina. I've got probably 4,000 square feet of perennial and flower beds. The roses are in with the perennials. Yes, that's what I do. It's organic. And so that's what you're going to find is just a lot. And what you're also going to find from me is permission for your roses to have some disease, to have some insect damage, to be like any other plant in your garden, not flawless.
Now, with roses, I'm just like any plant, people can use pesticides or they can go in organic means. And I'm based on what you're telling us, you kind of go with that organic means of the common sense. What can I do or what can I allow it to happen to still be beautiful and make it through the season without a whole lot of issue?
Exactly. Yeah, I do. I mean, again, keep in mind what's the rose's job in the garden. If you exhibit, then yeah, you need that perfection. So maybe you are going to go a little bit more towards, some interference in that sense of the word. But I'm not exhibiting, and the vast majority are not. You just want a really nice, pretty plant. So, in terms of like insects or insecticides or things like that, well, find the beneficials. Build that environment to bring the beneficials into your garden. What combats aphids in your neighborhood? In my case, it's hoverflies. I've got plants for hoverflies. So and pick disease-resistant varieties, of which there are so many in this day and age. So that's the key to the whole thing is you don't need all those chemicals in order to grow roses any more than you need it to grow really most other plants.
So what are some things to keep in mind for people who are going to grow roses for the first year? And I guess the second part of that question is, people always want to have as many blooms as possible. Is there a trick to getting the maximum production off of a plant, or is it all genetics?
The answer to your second question is yes, and that's a teaser, and I'll jump into the first one first. So in terms of growing your first year in roses, patience is what I really advise. The rule we always use as roses is sleep, creep, leap. So the first year they're going to sit and they're going to want to establish their root system. That's what you want. You want that plant to get its roots first. Remember, roots first, top second, absolutely key. Then you'll start to see them push some growth. And by the second or third years when they really come into their own and start to blossom a lot. So that's the key with roses. Be patient. Give that rose time to settle into your garden. Don't automatically hit it with, a high nitrogen, which is that first number on the NPK scale. Give it time to settle in and get to know your garden a little bit and stuff like that. That's a real important thing like that. Light hand when it comes to trimming and pruning. Let the rose find its own size and its own source and what it wants to be in your garden. That's the main thing to do. And in terms of the rest of it, yeah, I mean, roses, they're at the end of the day, they're easy to grow.
I think that's definitely very helpful. I think people are intimidated by it. Maybe they overthink something like growing roses. Now, what are some great rose growing resources that you could direct people to?
Yeah, I would say, I mentioned the American Rose Society. I think that's a great resource. They've got a national organization. They've got local chapters all over the country. That's a wonderful resource for people who grow roses in your neck of the woods. So I think that's a great place to go. The internet, Facebook groups. There's some wonderful Facebook groups out there that talk about growing roses where you can hook up with people locally as well. Local independent garden centers are also great rose resources for things like that. So those are the places that I would start you with. I think, again, I think the American Rose Society with their local chapters is really a wonderful place to get introduced to the world of roses.
Now, I'll put you on the spot in your journey in being the expert in roses that you are. Is there a mistake that sticks out in your mind going, I know now, why would I have done that back then?
Boy, that's a good one. I got to tell you, in 20 years, Jory, you're the first person to ever ask me that question. So I love it. Yeah, I think if I had to go back and have a mistake, I started growing roses in Los Angeles, California, and which is sort of an intense, exhibiting rose showing area. And I think I fussed over them too much. And it took me a while to begin to realize that that's not the thing to do. And so I realized, don't fuss over them too much. Let them be what they want to be. So if I made a mistake, I worked too hard at it, I think would be the mistake that I made.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate having you all on the program and all of your great information. Paul, can you tell our listeners on where they can find out more about you and your book and all of the information you have for them?
Yeah, the best place to go is my website, which is very simply paulzimmermanroses.com. There's my book there. You can purchase it there. Also, the link to my Facebook group and all the other things that you may want to find out about what I do and what I can help you with. So just, paulzimmermanroses.com. That's the central place to get a hold of me.
Well, Paul, we greatly appreciate your time and the information you not only educated Holly and myself with, but all of our listeners across the country.
It's been my pleasure, and happy rosing.
Hey there, gardeners. Thanks for checking out this segment of the Gardening with Joey and Holly radio show. If you like what you've seen, you can search through the channel and find full in-studio videos of the entire show. If you want to go another route, you can search for it on your favorite podcast platform by searching the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener radio show or the Gardening with Joey and Holly radio show, and you can download it and take it with you. You can check out all past seasons at our website, thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com, under the radio tabs at the top of the page. We thank you for joining us. We hope you've learned and enjoyed the show, the segment, and we'll see you next time.